At the Geopolitics HelpLIne, we tend to focus on medium-length questions. Enough heft that they require some thought, but not enough for a dissertation. But that lets some still relevant, and some especially silly questions fall through the cracks. Well, as an experiment, today we will be doing a rapid-fire session of some of your short questions, designed for me to be able to answer in a paragraph or less. Let's dive straight into them. Was the Kursk offensive worth it? Yes, definitely. It was something that Russia was just leaving wide open. It forced the Kremlin to move troops out of eastern Ukraine, and it laid bare that ordinary Russians did not care at all about trying to defend internationally recognized Russian territory. It was a great strategy from Ukraine. We talk a lot about events, information, and actions as moving bargaining lines back and forth without collapsing the bargaining model itself. But what would it take for a party to fully collapse/be defeated in the sense of losing the essential self-preservation structures, decision-making, military force, etc., such that negotiations no longer make sense to begin with? I suspect that this question mostly had Russia-Ukraine in mind, so let me answer with that framing. You have to reach a point where domestic actors do not have any faith in their own state anymore. All governments to some degree survive because there is a mutual expectation that they are in charge. For example, I cannot one day decide to ignore US laws. There are 300-something million others who still believe in them, and it will go poorly for me if I am the only one pretending otherwise. But if everyone else starts to abandon the system, then I might get away with it. Now, how states keep that mutual expectation running will vary from government form to government form. For democracies, it tends to be the notion that we have rules that we all agree to under a social contract. For autocracies, it tends to be the fear that acting otherwise is liable to get you disappeared or worse. But we are all still operating in a mutual expectation system to get this to work. Anyway, that is why it was so important for Zelensky to get out onto the streets night one and release a video telling everyone that he was still there. It is a lot easier for that mutual expectation to fall apart if the person that everyone thinks is in charge is 1,000 kilometers away. On the Russian end of the spectrum, Putin will start to have societal problems when people are no longer afraid of him, and perhaps more importantly, people think that other people are not afraid of him. Military embarrassments are a step in that direction, but that meta-step of my beliefs about your beliefs is hard to get to work. That is, in part, how autocratic systems can get by despite some awful policy outcomes. Another way that this type of thing can generally fall apart is if a government no longer has the ability to pay anyone. If even government employees are done with the system, then no one is going to buy into it. And although we talk a lot about Russia's financial problems, the Kremlin is not destitute. Russia would fall apart due to a lack of faith in the political system well before it becomes an economic question. And yes, I realize that I broke my one-paragraph rule a whole 2 questions into this new format. Why do many Western analysts ignore Eastern Europe's input regarding the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and focus mostly on what Western Europe does? I suppose a lot of this is that the folks a generation older than me started forming world opinions at a time when Eastern Europe was sitting behind an Iron Curtain, or trying to recover from the Soviet period. I assure you that people on the ground do not think this way. It is impossible to do so when Poland spends so much on its military. But even then, you will still have legacies of the older system. Just recently, for example, Poland grew frustrated when France, Germany, and the United Kingdom were holding a meeting about the war without anyone from the eastern flank there. That ultimately just does not work, again because of where the military spending is. Do bargaining models take into account the IRGC's religious conviction? Well, I cannot say for sure what exactly you had in mind, but my default interpretation of this is that they are just very resolved, and that gets subsumed into interpreting your physical costs at a lower rate. Side note, I always get a kick out of comments that say we cannot account for crazy actors in these models. I literally wrote a book about the T-word, and often the S-word version of the T-word, that uses models from beginning to end. The idea that people can have strange preferences is nothing new to the folks in my discipline. Speaking of which, Game theory is predicated on actors making rational decisions, but humans are inherently irrational, especially paranoid dictators. How do you reconcile this? Speaking of which, indeed, game theory is not predicated on actors making rational decisions. Some models assume this, but not all do. And I do not think it is irrational for dictators to be paranoid, given that literally everyone is coming after them in some way or another. Usually the evidence put forth for a dictator being irrational like this is simply lazy analysis. If you start with the presumption that a strange behavior implies irrationality, then, well, it is easy to declare that leaders are irrational. You get a lot farther, though, if you see strange behaviors and start thinking about under what conditions would those behaviors make strategic sense. It is just much harder to think in the second way, so people do not do it. Not because they are irrational, but because the mental load to do so is high and the payoff for it is low. Contrast those incentives to what leaders face, where sometimes forming weird strategies is necessary for their political survival, and exerting the effort to figure them out is very much worth it. Just look at Russian recruitment for a moment. It is absolutely crazy from my perspective that anyone would want to take a contract and head to Ukraine. But I am speaking from a place of privilege, where I am not wondering where my next meal is coming from. Too often, pushing claims of irrationality onto someone else just shows how the accuser lacks the ability to empathize with someone else's position. Will the United States actually occupy Kharg Island? Setting aside any taco-related thoughts here, I do not see the utility in doing so. The blockade that the United States is administering makes Kharg Island irrelevant. The purpose of Kharg Island is to load up fuel tankers. If the fuel tankers cannot exit Hormuz, then the island does not matter. It would therefore be redundant to fight over it, but it would come at a significantly greater risk of casualties to the United States. Chances of making a "Putin is done" video in 2026? We only have about 6 months left, and his position is not that tenuous. He is old though, so maybe 5 to 10%? Note that I checked the prediction markets after writing this, and the odds there are 9%, so not exactly a hot take on my part. Would Iran winning the World Cup make the war shorter or longer? Probably longer. I did a video on this 4 years ago. There is a paper that shows that countries that just barely qualify for the World Cup get involved in more disputes than countries that just barely fail to qualify. I was sad that it did not get very many views when I first published it. I also was sad at how many comments said, "Correlation isn't causation," maybe in the Putin voice, who knows, and then dismissed the entire argument, even though the study is causally identified. I feel like this is a central problem of Statistics 101 being somewhat generally known now, but Statistics 102, which cares much more about causal identification, is basically foreign to anyone outside of the sciences. If you want to watch it, I will make it one of the highlighted videos at the end of today's session. Does crisis bargaining theory explain deadlock in Congress? Not really. The crux of crisis bargaining is that war is inefficient. Usually you get deadlocked in legislative bargaining because you need multiple actors, say the pivotal voter in the House, the 51st voter in the Senate, and the president, to all prefer a new policy to the status quo, and that is often not the case. Inefficiency, by definition, means that there is some deal that makes everyone better off. So if the president, or someone else, is vetoing a bill because it makes them worse off, that is not an efficiency issue. But there is a much, much larger literature on legislative bargaining than crisis bargaining theory. So rest assured that people do care about this. After 3 semesters, I just took my graduate studies in the opposite direction. Do you expect this sequel to the Cold War to last as long as the original? No, at least not in the current form. Russia is not institutionalized like the Soviet Union was. When Putin dies, something else will happen. I do not know what that something else is, and it could be worse. Western analysts are often way too optimistic in this regard. I also do not know about China, but there is a clear possible breakpoint, which is why I would bet on a lower amount of time as compared to the original Cold War. What other geopolitical events would you be covering if not for Ukraine and Iran? China and Taiwan for sure, which I still get to do in my offline hours. Actually, I find it very interesting how much of a disconnect there is in interest between the general public and policymakers on these issues. Outside of these videos, I spend way more time on Iran and China, but there just are not as many eyeballs on those here for whatever reason. If you were transported to a medieval court, how would you explain lines on maps? I do not think that I would change anything about what I currently do, other than some of the country names. But immediately upon finishing my presentation to the court, I would head to the closest thing to a math department and develop calculus. But upon hearing of the vast improvements we will soon be making in military technology as a consequence of calculus, the opposing kingdom will launch a preventive war and kill me. Oops. Other than nukes, what technology or weapon has most shifted the balance of power? It has not quite happened yet, but the answer in a year or two is going to be AI. I know that people will have a knee-jerk reaction to that, but there is a reason that so many militaries are investing so much in it, and it is starting to influence everything in Ukraine. It is a shame that everyone got familiar with AI because of its ability to make oddly styled images, when 2 models down the line, it was way more powerful. So much of the US-China relationship right now is being defined by the politics of chips, but the kinetic wars drive all of those headlines off the front pages. Name a time when international law affected crisis bargaining outcomes. Did the rules-based world order ever exist? Yes, in the sense that incentives in the West to get along with each other encourage them to, well, get along with each other. And that has not changed. But no, in the sense that artificial international laws were driving that cooperation. Name a time when international law affected crisis bargaining outcomes. Okay, fine. For real this time. International law can be useful for coordinating expectations, and that does have broad relevance for passing domestic laws that, say, enforce the Geneva Conventions. How is it that, in most of the West at least, it seems as if international law and international institutions are well discussed, whereas the idea that the world is in anarchy has comparatively much less visibility? Touching on an earlier question, I think that this is a matter of cognitive load. It is much, much easier to take international law at face value. It is much, much harder for high school teachers to start with a claim that most international law is toothless, and then go on to explain why it still exists and under what conditions it might actually matter. So, every year, Intro to International Relations professors have to spend a week trying to unteach this, while still trying to calm everyone and explain that the world will still be okay despite that. How much do you simplify your videos compared to what you teach academically? A lot. I have a couple of technical videos over the last couple of weeks, but even for those, I was using overly simplified versions of models and doing proof by picture rather than actual proofs. This causes some concern for me, because every now and then, a proof by picture can be actively misleading, but that is the price that we pay. In anything outside of an intro class, I'm going to teach the real mechanics, and for a graduate class, we will spend half of our time learning the mechanics behind the mechanics, none of which you see on my channel. What is the strangest/most fascinating country geopolitically speaking? I used to say that the most successful crisis bargaining theorist was probably a 10-year-old living in India. They just didn't know it yet. They have better math education over there, and both the civil and international conflicts India has had are so common and diverse that they would naturally have a great background to write case studies. However, that part has changed in the past couple of years because AI is so good at tracking leads for case studies. So who knows now? But the point remains that India is a very interesting country politically. What's the best example of crisis bargaining theory that you know in fiction? I think that this is the second time that I have referenced it, but Deep Space Nine's In the Pale Moonlight is my answer. They are basically like, hey, those other guys are over-optimistic. Please believe me, even though this is cheap talk. Then you have a whole subplot involving one-time optolithic data rods to make it credible. Data rods, by the way, that are canonically in crisis bargaining theory. I can't believe I got away with putting that in the textbook without any of the 16 peer reviewers calling me out. Who is your favorite character in Deep Space Nine? Well, that question is quite the coincidence. Also, you already knew that the answer is Garak. You're wasting all of our time here. Do you still enjoy movies even though they have bad diplomacy/crisis bargaining in them? Yes, I have learned to shut off my brain for them. House of Dynamite is an excellent example. I really enjoyed that film, but I did not think that it was realistic at all. Do leaders care as much about crisis bargaining as you do? They might not call it that, but yes, they are not wasting as much time slaying spires as I am, or at least I hope they're not. Favorite Joe Biden quote? Corn Pop was a bad dude. Do you subject your students to your videos to make more ad revenue? I do have all of my lectures on YouTube, but that would be a very inefficient way to make money. Even if I had a 200-person class, and they all diligently watched the digital version of the lectures for the entire semester, that would be like $20. What got you into crisis bargaining? On a substantive level, probably as a 9th grader playing Metal Gear Solid 1. On an academic level, reading a paper for the first time that used a model, and becoming enamored with arguments that preserve logical validity. I had read too many papers earlier in my undergraduate career that were all over the place. Where is the best place to get a garbage plate in Rochester? Dogtown. Hope it still exists. How long since you left San Diego, and do you still think about In-N-Out? 16 years, and every time I pass by an inferior fast food restaurant, which is equivalent to every time I pass by a fast food restaurant. What is the craziest conspiracy theory you've seen someone make up regarding your channel? At the beginning of the war, the logo I had for my channel consisted of red, white, and blue letters. Someone, and not as a joke, said that this was proof that I was working for Russia. Alternatively, I get a kick whenever I see a comment saying that I am AI, when the video has the clip of Rutte kicking me off stage, or me destroying a drone. Is Iceland small? Yes, and I got a real kick of how a couple of Icelandic nationalists got really offended by that skit, even though I had Icelandic friends write the vast majority of those jokes. How will this channel survive when the wars end? I don't know. I will worry about that after I turn 122. Favorite Easter egg you have put in a video? Only a couple of weeks ago, I started a video where each consecutive sentence named, in order, the levels in GoldenEye. So the first sentence contained dam, the second facility, the third runway, and so forth. Sadly, I am not sure that anyone noticed. Do you really write your scripts on your phone? Yeah, I do. I will do most of my research on a computer and outline the script on my phone. Then I will write out the rest on the phone while doing something else, usually at the gym between sets or on a stationary bike. That process is way, way more enjoyable than sitting at a computer terminal for 10 hours a day. How long can you keep the streak going? I am not sure. I have gotten a lot better with my workflow, particularly with the video production part of this. I still do everything myself, so the margins are tight. After I'm done with this video, I will be 5 days ahead of schedule, but I have a busy week ahead of me. So I would guess either the streak comes to an end within the next 10 days, or it continues on for a much longer time. Probably still shorter than the Undertaker's streak in terms of calendar time, though. Okay, that takes care of today's entry into the streak. This one was a little different, so let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.